has been at the center of the most serious presidential scandals probably in U.S. history. He's facing the most serious investigations of any president ever. He is probably facing the most serious legal jeopardy of any president in U.S. history. But at the same time, his legal defense has been a crazy quilt. I mean, there's his longtime personal lawyer who has both flipped against him and is now awaiting the start of his federal prison term. There are the unusual hires, the unusual choices he made for his initial counsel to handle the Russia investigation. They both flamed out, but not before distinguishing themselves by having loud conversations about very sensitive aspects of the president's legal defense at an outdoor table at a Washington restaurant while they were seated next to a reporter from the New York Times who promptly reported everything they said. The president has also had a man named Rudy Giuliani working as part of his legal team, and I'm not going to say anything about that. He has also had a Fox News talk radio lawyer guy representing him, whose previous legal experience was mostly about Ten Commandments moments. And whatever you think of that roster, for a president facing such serious legal problems like the ones President Trump is facing, it has been a weird thing that his legal representation has not been like A-list folks or even B-list. It's been like a grab bag. They're the white elephant lawyers who were, let's just say, otherwise available. It's been a strange mismatch between the presidential legal jeopardy here and the presidential legal defense. Up until now. Now that would seem to be changing. If in fact the new White House counsel really has just added 17 new lawyers to the White House counsel's office within the past couple of weeks, and none of them are people who are also planning on continuing their talk radio shows while they do this gig. It is awkward, though, that hiring of 17 new lawyers for the president, that maps neatly onto this government shutdown, which is now in its 19th day. You may have seen today the Coast Guard just published a handy guide for its personnel during the shutdown, a new guide for Coast Guard personnel titled Managing Your Finances During a Furlough. The 5-page tip sheet advises Coast Guard personnel that they should, quote, be creative to find supplemental income during the furlough period. Quote, here are a few ideas for adding income. Quote, have a garage sale. Offer to watch children, walk pets, or house sit. Turn your hobby into income. Does that depend on your hobby? Quote, become a mystery shopper. Retailers are desperate to check how their in-store customer service is and will employ you to shop and rate their service. A handful of tips for Coast Guard personnel. This is Coast Guard advice to their personnel for how to try to piece it together as the shutdown grinds on. The FDA, which oversees safety of 80% of the U.S. food supply, the FDA has also now announced that they have suspended all routine inspections of domestic food processing facilities. According to an interview the FDA commissioner just did with the Washington Post, the FDA is now looking to try to figure out some way they might be able to get some inspectors back on the job maybe next week despite the shutdown, if only so they can start looking at the really high-risk stuff like seafood and soft cheeses and vegetables, food that has posed particular risks in terms of foodborne illnesses in this country. Yeah, why do we need the FDA inspectors? Those are just government bean counters, right? As we have reported over the course of the shutdown, the U.S. judiciary system, the federal court system, is due to be out of money the day after tomorrow, whereupon individual courts and judges will have to start triaging, making decisions themselves about what's going to happen with U.S. federal justice from here on out. But while that is all happening, the White House counsel's office has just hired 17 new lawyers to deal with the president's scandals. Carol Lennox's article in the Post tonight suggests that some of the urgency there leading to the hiring of 17 new lawyers may be due to expectations that the special counsel's office, its investigation, the Mueller investigation, may be heading into its final act. Quote, there's a growing sense that the special counsel's closely held investigation could come to culmination soon. Some Trump advisors think Mueller could deliver the confidential report explaining his findings to senior Justice Department officials next month. Quote, under the rules authorizing the special counsel, the Attorney General can then decide whether to share the report or parts of it with Congress and the public. Some House leaders have vowed to immediately seek to obtain a copy of Mueller's findings. White House advisors say the White House would resist the release of any details describing confidential and sensitive communications between the president and his senior aides. And apparently they have hired this fleet of 12 new lawyers and counting in order to try to support that expected strategy. Now, I'll just between us, I will tell you that I personally have been aggressively agnostic when it comes to any expectations about the overall scope of the Mueller investigation or its timing or what Mueller plans to do in terms of some sort of report or not. I am agnostic on those matters. I think that I don't know. But you should know that NBC News tonight has another separate piece of reporting that really bolsters those expectations about Mueller that are being described in the Washington Post tonight, those expectations that Mueller may be heading toward his big reveal. We all woke up this morning to the headlines in multiple news sources. ABC News was first, but a number of news organizations quickly got the story that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is planning to leave the Justice Department, and that is a big freaking deal. Rod Rosenstein is, of course, a key figure in the Mueller investigation and everything else that a Deputy Attorney General does. Deputy Attorney General essentially runs the Justice Department. But on the Russia investigation in particular, Rosenstein's been key because Attorney General Jeff Sessions was recused from everything having to do with the Russia investigation. It was Rosenstein who appointed Robert Mueller to be special counsel in the first place. And Rosenstein has since played a day-to-day role, apparently through to the present day, in overseeing Mueller's work. That day-to-day oversight role by Rosenstein has reportedly persisted even in recent weeks, even while the new acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, has been at the Justice Department, at least nominally, he has been in charge. The new prospect in all these headlines today that Rosenstein is about to leave, that of course has very serious implications for oversight of the Mueller investigation at a crucial time. But this is what NBC News' Pete Williams is reporting tonight about Rosenstein's plans, and this is potentially really important. According to Pete Williams and Alan Smith at NBC News, quote, a source close to Rosenstein says he intends to stay on until Mueller submits a report to the Justice Department on the Russian meddling investigation. The source said that would mean Rosenstein would remain until early March. That would imply that Mueller's report will be out and done by early March. Quote, several legal sources have said that they expect the Mueller team to submit its report by mid to late February, although they say that timeline could change based on unforeseen investigative developments. So that was the story at NBCnews.com earlier from Pete Williams. Pete Williams tonight has updated the story to add more detail about these expectations, and I can share some of that reporting with you now. According to NBC News' Pete Williams tonight, a source close to Rosenstein says that Rosenstein's intention is to stay until Mueller winds down the bulk of the investigative and courtroom work in the Russia investigation. According to this single source close to Rosenstein, quote, that could be mid to late February. Several weeks later, Mueller would present his report to the Justice Department. Multiple sources are also telling NBC News that Mueller is near the end of his investigation and will soon begin paring down staff. Again, that is reporting tonight from NBC News. It's obviously important both in terms of what's going to happen with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, how long he's going to stay at the Justice Department, how that departure may be keyed to what's going on in the Mueller investigation. That's also very important reporting when it comes to the Mueller investigation itself. So we'll have more on that coming up a little bit later on this hour. But meanwhile, here is something that you should watch for first thing tomorrow. Despite the ongoing and now critical government shutdown, Congress is going to be in session tomorrow, and the Secretary of the Treasury, Steven Mnuchin, is going to be at the House tomorrow. He's going to be briefing members of Congress, members of the House, on the decision made by his department just before Christmas to drop sanctions on companies controlled by this guy, a Russian oligarch close to Vladimir Putin, who was sanctioned specifically because of Russia's interference in the U.S. presidential election in 2016. His name is Oleg Deripaska. He is subject to U.S. sanctions. He is banned from entering the United States. Awkwardly, he also has a history of doing a lot of business with President Trump's now convicted felon campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Associated Press reported soon after Trump's inauguration that Manafort had entered into a contract with Deripaska in which he would be paid $10 million a year to promote the interests of Vladimir Putin's government around the world. The Washington Post and The Atlantic magazine also both reported on Manafort's private communications during the time he was running the Trump campaign, including Manafort reportedly offering, through his right-hand man in business, Konstantin Kilimnik, U.S. federal prosecutors have twice described in court filings as being linked to Russian intelligence. According to communications obtained and published by the Washington Post and the Atlantic magazine, Manafort, during the time he was running Trump's presidential campaign, offered Deripaska, quote, private briefings on the presidential campaign at Deripaska's convenience. Kilimnik was Manafort's business partner. He appears to have been the go-between between Manafort and this Russian oligarch, Oleg Deripaska, who is now sanctioned. Kilimnik himself is believed by the FBI to be associated with Russian intelligence. Well, on December 19th, last month, right before Christmas, the Trump administration, the Treasury Department of the Trump administration, announced that they were going to relax sanctions on Oleg Deripaska's companies. And you know, there was always going to be blowback against that because of the reason Deripaska was sanctioned in the first place, and also because of Deripaska's troubling links to the Trump campaign at the time that Russia was interfering in the U.S. election. But when they announced the relaxation of the Deripaska sanctions right before Christmas, one neat trick that Steven Mnuchin and the Treasury Department played with that timing is that because of that timing, they made sure there would be almost no opportunity for Congress to object to that decision, to potentially force the reversal of that sanctions decision. Under U.S. law, Congress has 30 days after the announcement of a sanctions decision like this to express its objections and to block the administration's decision. By announcing it on December 19th, which is what they did, right before Christmas and right before a now indefinite government shutdown, by doing it on December 19th, the Trump administration assured that there just wouldn't be all that many working days in Washington before that 30-day window closed, after which Congress would be powerless to stop or reverse this decision. Well, as we reported last night, 7 Democratic chairmen of House committees nevertheless have objected now. They wrote to Steven Mnuchin yesterday that demanded that he appear before the House to explain Treasury's decision to relax these sanctions. That's why Mnuchin will be at the House tomorrow. They'll be giving a classified briefing to interested members of Congress about that decision to relax sanctions on this Russian oligarch. And I know what you're thinking. I know you're thinking, yeah, sure, Maddo, I know, but that's just the Democratic-controlled House. What can they do on this? Actually, in this case, this one potentially could be a bipartisan and bicameral thing. And I say that not as sort of a, naive hope. I say that because of recent history. Republicans in both the House and the Senate, they have actually been willing to defy Trump on the issue of Russian sanctions, even if they haven't been able to find an independent bone in their body on any other subject. They have done this. I mean, Trump objected vehemently in 2017 when Congress first voted to create this structure for Russian sanctions, which allows Congress to object and reverse the administration's decisions on these sorts of things within 30 days. The White House complained about it. They said they didn't want it. But at the time, Congress, both houses of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, were sufficiently freaked out by the Trump administration on this issue that they voted absolutely overwhelmingly to defy the president, specifically on this issue of Russian sanctions. That vote in 2017 was 98-2 in the Senate. It was 419-3 in the House. So yes, we are going to see Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin dragged before the House tomorrow to try to explain what they just did by lifting these Russian sanctions. And yes, the House is now controlled by Democrats. But that doesn't mean that the Republican-controlled Senate might not object to the lifting of these sanctions as well. Don't laugh. It has happened before, and it has happened specifically on this issue. And in fact, we just got a statement from the Banking Committee in the Senate on this issue suggesting that this really is something that might get some bipartisan objections. Here's the statement, quote, bipartisan staff of the Senate Banking Committee, bipartisan staff, are formally reviewing Treasury's decision to lift sanctions on 3 firms that were sanctioned for being owned or controlled by sanctioned Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. The decision raises key questions that the administration must answer. We've gone ahead and posted the full statement we got from the Democratic spokesperson on the banking committee tonight. You can see it at our website at mattoblog.com. But the key insight here is that it's bipartisan, that both the Democratic staff and the Republican staff on the banking committee in the Senate are working on this question of whether or not those sanctions really ought to have been reversed for Oleg Deripaska's companies. So that is now a live and interesting question. We have there's almost never any suspense as to whether or not something will happen on a bipartisan basis. It never does. But this is a live question, which may defy some of the partisan nonsense we have seen on every other issue. Is it really shady that the Trump administration is trying to lift sanctions on Oleg Deripaska's business empire right now, given Oleg Deripaska's relationship to Russian interference in our election and the larger scandal that relates to the Trump administration therein? If it is shady that the Trump administration is trying to lift these sanctions now, could this actually be something where both halves of Congress and both parties act like they did before on Russian sanctions to brush back the Trump administration on this issue? Live question. We're going to have more on that coming up tonight as well. And that relates, of course, to the new revelations about Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. As we learned yesterday, Manafort's defense team inadvertently disclosed information in a court filing yesterday that was supposed to be redacted, but apparently Manafort's lawyers don't know how to use that part of the software that protects people from text black boxes. Part of what we accidentally learned because of those bad redactions yesterday is that prosecutors in the special counsel's office have alleged that Manafort shared polling data from the 2016 campaign with his business associate, Konstantin Kilimnik. And again, Kilimnik has twice been described in court filings as having links to Russian intelligence in the view of the FBI. Kilimnik himself has now been indicted in the Russia scandal. He has not, however, been arrested or brought into a U.S. court. He's believed to have fled to Russia to avoid U.S. justice, which means we may never see him in this country again. There's also very few known photos of him. This is one of the only ones we've got. He's just not a person people have seen on television. But it's interesting. In April of last year, Radio Free Europe was able to track down Konstantin Kilimnik, and they were able to conduct a brief interview with him, in part about his relationship with Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort. It's an audio interview. It took place in a sort of noisy cafe, but we've got the audio of it, and so you can hear how Konstantin Kilimnik in this interview describes Paul Manafort and what Paul Manafort was good at in his work.
I can say this on the record. Manafort is, a guy who can merge, strategy and messages into something that will work for victory. I mean, he has done it all across the world, and he has done it really, just very skillfully. I mean, honestly, I've seen him work in different countries, and he really does, takes very seriously his polling, and he can spend, 2 weeks, going through the data, and he'll come with the best strategy you could ever have, and he'll put it on the table of a candidate.
He takes very seriously his polling. He will spend weeks going through the data. Again, that is the voice of Konstantin Kilimnik, who is believed to have fled to Russia. He's been indicted in the Mueller investigation. He's assessed by the FBI to be actively linked to Russian intelligence. For years, he worked alongside Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. And in that interview, Kilimnik is describing what he sees as Paul Manafort's secret sauce, and that Paul Manafort was best at as a political consultant. The biggest strength he brought to all of his work in all the different countries where he did. Polling. As Kilimnik said, he, quote, takes very seriously his polling. Well, in that, oops, we forgot to really redact it court filing yesterday, we learned that prosecutors in the special counsel's office are alleging that Manafort sent his beloved polling data, the core of what he does. He sent that data to Konstantin Kilimnik, who again is linked to Russian intelligence, and he sent him that data during Trump's presidential campaign. Late last night, the New York Times added more detail to this story, including new detail on the timing of this data transfer and its nature. According to the Times, Manafort transferred this data from the Trump campaign to Kalimnik in the spring of 2016. The Times further reports that it was both Manafort and Rick Gates who were involved in transferring that data. And the Times says that the transfer involved not just public polling data, but also private polling data that was internal to the campaign, which of course is among the most highly prized data in the campaign. Why would you give data like that to someone in another country in the middle of the campaign? Why would you give data like that to a guy who's linked to Russian intelligence? As Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff told ABC News today, quote, "The question is why? Why would Russians be interested in polling data on an American campaign? Why would that be of value? How would the Russians make use of that?" And of course, why did Manafort lie about it? Last night, the New York Times reported that the Russian intelligence guy, Kalimnik, he passed on that polling data that he got from Manafort. The Times initially reported that he